Is Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein about to be fired? Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says he'll be meeting with the president at the White House on Thursday. What does that all mean for special counsel Robert Mueller? Plus, a new woman accuses Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct as the nominee is scheduled to give testimony about just that later this week. How will this affect his confirmation process? And President Trump says he expects to have a second summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un soon. We're going to be talking about that and so much more right here on this second hour of America Talks Live. All right, thanks for sticking in with us into the second hour of America Talks Live. And if you're just joining us, welcome to this Monday edition. Gina's back.
Gina's back.
From D.C.
Back
and
in
New York.
the house.
On her
Good to have you.
tour.
Good
A
to
lot
be back.
going on today. A lot going on today.
Yeah.
We're going to be taking your phone calls today. We always want to hear from you, but especially today because there's so much that is just so rich and really historic. I think that none of us will forget living through this time period where political precedent is being set. We haven't seen the likes of this, I think, since Watergate.
You're right. I think in 20, 30 years, I'm going to know exactly where I was when you came back to set from your book.
Because you missed me.
Wow. Oh, he went there. Of course he did. All right, a lot going on. As we mentioned, Kavanaugh, another accuser coming forward. Rosenstein, we don't know if he's out or if he's not. Supposedly, Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, he's going to be meeting with the president Thursday. That's because the president is in New York right now for the UN General Assembly. All right, let's take a look at what's happening at the White House, if that wasn't enough for you. So later today, President Trump will have a signing ceremony for the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. That is going to be coming your way around 3:45 Eastern Time this afternoon. Be sure and keep it right here to Newsmax TV for live coverage of that event.
All right, now let's take a look at our top story this hour, and that are these rumors swirling around.
Yeah.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Will he or won't he be fired? Well, Rosenstein left the White House just a little while ago. Now, this is coming after Axios reported that he was about to resign because he thought he was going to be fired anyway. A lot of conflicting reports today. We've been checking in with our own White House correspondent, John Gizzi, who's in the White House briefing room at this very moment. And we're going to be, I believe we have John on the phone with us now. Oh, we don't have John on the phone.
Okay, well, hopefully we can touch base with him.
And we'll be bringing John in if anything develops. Now, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders has released some new information. She put out the first statement on Twitter about all of this today, just a little while ago. Sanders wrote, quote, at the request of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, he and President Trump had an extended conversation to discuss the recent news stories. Because the president is at the United Nations General Assembly and has a full schedule with leaders around the world, they will meet on Thursday when the president returns to Washington, D.C. And we're going to have Larry Klayman, former federal prosecutor, our Newsmax legal analyst, on to discuss this in just a little while. Plus, John Gizzi is going to be joining us periodically if we find out any new information about this. But this is really intriguing.
It is intriguing. So obviously there was that report that came out last week. This was a New York Times report that said that Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General,
was
wiring himself
up, and he wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment.
Right.
As Gina noted earlier, then Rosenstein said, well, it was all a joke. But then Andrew McCabe, the fired FBI number 2, said, that wasn't a joke. I've got notes on this. Gina raised an excellent point. Why would you ever joke about removing the president as the Deputy Attorney General?
Yeah.
That's not something that would be funny.
No.
Like, we've all had back channel conversations at work where maybe you took something lightly or a little bit disregarding, but that just isn't something that
there'd be no
would be funny.
no
context that I would think
to
of.
joke about that.
I think our next guest would agree with you, but let's ask him ourselves. We want to welcome in former federal prosecutor Larry Klayman. He's also the founder of Freedom Watch. As always, good to have you here on the program. So let's go to this rumor right now. What do you think? We're hearing that Rosenstein, and it was Axios that first reported this, but there are multiple media outlets that are also saying the same thing, more or less, saying
Washington
that he
Post
plans to resign
reported
because he's expecting the president to fire him. You just heard John read that statement from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Again, he's expected to meet with the president this Thursday, and that's because the president is in New York right now. What do you anticipate?
Let me add one thing before Larry answers, because Pete Williams over at NBC News reported a third version independently that Rosenstein did go to the White House. He is expected to be fired, but that Williams sources say Rosenstein said, Larry, he will not resign if asked. He's going to force them to fire him. So which of these versions do you believe, and what's the end game? What in the final analysis, when we figure out what's going on here, what do you think happens?
First of all, there's the political element. Why is it Thursday? That's the date that Judge Kavanaugh's accuser is going to testify in front of Congress, as currently said. So the White House is cleverly setting that on Thursday to take heat away from what's going to happen with regard to Rosenstein. Now, there are two factors here. I would fire him. You can't leave him in place. I mean, it's like leaving Brutus as part of the Roman Senate.
Right.
You can't do that. And you have to set an example for others in the administration that you won't tolerate sedition, even perhaps to the level of treason at this point. But on the other hand, the old Machiavellian approach, keep your enemies close, that may prevail. And in fact, Sean Hannity of our competitor on Fox News incorrectly, I think, gave the president this advice. It may be why he's hesitating. He's been taking that advice. And just simply to keep him close, because he could potentially be a witness for Mueller with regard to the firing of Comey, who's his friend, is wrong. You have to do things on principle. And on principle, this guy's got to be fired. And I believe that they chose Thursday because they could do it under the wire, so to speak, under the table, and not have as much publicity about doing it because of the hearings, the Senate Judiciary Committee.
You bring up an
Larry,
interesting point.
Do you think, though, Larry, that part of this might be, I know that the president, he's not the kind of guy that just likes to make enemies. And so is there a way to hold Rosenstein close, to quote you, without actually keeping him in his current position? In other words, do you think there's some agreement that the president and he might come to, and that might be part of the reason for this meeting, things that they couldn't perhaps rectify over the phone, but they might be able to do when they meet face-to-face? Because I'm having a lot of people tell me, my sources, that perhaps part of this is that Rosenstein really doesn't want to lose his job and wants to meet with the president.
Oh, sure. He doesn't want to lose the job. He's a career Justice Department. To be fired will have an impact on his future career. Of course, right. Democrat law firms in Washington, who are most prevalent, these really big ones, will be happy to hire him. He can do his GoFundMe, like McCabe, make lots of money.
And
but
write
on
a
the
book.
other hand, this is disgrace for him to be fired. He should be fired as a matter of principle. Principle, for once, has to prevail.
Hey, Larry, there's been some confusion over who would succeed Rosenstein overseeing the Mueller probe. Now, the conventional wisdom, what many of us believe, what we've been told, is that it's Noel Francisco, Solicitor General. However, earlier, one of our guests told us that it wasn't going to be Noel Francisco. So Roger Stone actually said it wasn't Noel Francisco, that early in the administration, an order was signed changing that line of succession, and it's a guy, Papuccio, I think his name was. Panuccio. In the Department of Justice, who is an associate deputy attorney general. What are you hearing, Larry? You worked at DOJ. Would it be Francisco? Would it be this, I believe his name is Panuccio, another DOJ official, who, by the way, isn't confirmed by the Senate, so it's questionable if he even could take over the Mueller probe? Or is there even somebody else out there who we haven't heard of yet?
Let's hope it's not Pinocchio. I mean, but the reality here is you need somebody in there who is not an establishment Justice Department person. The institutional deep state aspect of the Justice Department, Democrat or Republican, circles the wagons and protects its own. You need somebody there who's going to make decisions, who's going to curtail the investigation of Mueller, which is out of control, who's going to prosecute individuals who committed crimes, whether it's Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, and others. Now, it's very unlikely you get somebody like that, but that's what you need inside of that position. Now, with regard to the Solicitor General, he very well may be a good person ideologically. Apparently, he's conservative. Rosenstein's not. Rosenstein was an Obama holdover. Rosenstein, I don't care if he's registered Republican or not, he scratches the backs of the Republican and the Democrat establishment, which are anti-Trump. And the president needs someone in there who's loyal to him, at least, because, look, sitting on top of him is an attorney general who's not loyal to him, who's become a darling of the left, who is loyal to himself and has protected his own flanks for the last 2 years, because he's under investigation by Mueller. I'm talking about Jeff Sessions. So let's hope that someday, not just Rosenstein, but Sessions goes. They need a complete cleaning of the house, of the rat's nest at my former alma mater, I'm sorry to say, the Justice Department.
So what do you think? So we're running against the clock, but so ultimately, what do you think is going to happen Thursday? Do you think he's going to fire him? Do you think he's going to resign? Do you think there's going to be nothing at all? This is going to be a big hoax.
And maybe stay friends, fake friends, and does Rosenstein go on running the Mueller trial?
If the president does not fire him, I answer it with a question, then the president will lose credibility. He's known as someone that takes action. I wrote a column. It's on our blog at Newsmax, Klayman's court this morning. The swamp is on the verge of swallowing up the president. Okay, it's true. Because the president's getting involved in the Kavanaugh scandal. I believe Kavanaugh is probably going to go down, not because there's any integrity up there in the Senate, but they're going to get cold feet up there. And I think the president will be forced to withdraw his nomination, for better or worse. And he's being swallowed up by the Justice Department at this point, plus the judges, the leftist judges on the federal bench. He's under siege. He's got to take strong action. He can't worry about appearances or the reaction of the liberal left. He's got to do what's right. You can't leave someone like this in charge, in effect, in charge of the Justice Department. This guy is a traitor.
Hey, Larry, we had Roger Stone on earlier. Roger, Roger, he's been in the political game a long time. He feels the Kavanaugh confirmation will most likely go forward. Chuck Grassley will hold the vote, and Kavanaugh will ultimately be confirmed by both the committee and the full Senate. Last 30 seconds to you. Why do you think that's not the case?
It's unfair. I mean, what we've seen is a biblical, in fact, greater than biblical proportions. Adam and Eve or Samson and Delilah. Okay, any allegation sticks these days with regard to the Me Too movement. There are people that are justifiably prosecuted, whether it's Bill Cosby or whether it's Harvey Weinstein, but it's become a witch hunt. So I believe that in the end, the president will probably withdraw the nomination because it's going to cost control of the Senate and the House. Not fairly, but because of the environment we live in today.
Well, Larry, we always appreciate your wisdom, and I think Larry is exactly right, unless you are Keith Ellison or John Kennedy or Bill Clinton, and then the rules are all different. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk more about the accusations against Brett Kavanaugh and how they could derail his confirmation process. We'll bring all of this to you and more coming up on America Talks Live. Stay with us.